Plan the United States Air Force should increase procurement contracts for electricity to be used in the United States and solar-powered satellites. Eventually, once the Air Force and airborne is air power, the Air Force is facing energy crisis that destroys future power projection. Dollars 12, the Air Force faces energy crisis given increased demand. Energy diminishing supplies demands for environmental solutions. The Air Force requires access to energy to provide its advantage over adversaries. Our emphasis increases target energy center of gravity. Assured energy advantage to promise our Air Force to be more sustainable. And to lack of Air Force investment in new technology destroys readiness, equal and regular 12 airport uniquely enforceability. The leaders the ability to wage mobile campaigns possible is not assumed continued factor of U.S. permanence in the skies of America. That assets spread war on especially within the price of preparedness graciously the United States found costs on preparing future conflicts will not be possible to rapidly design and field model weapon systems. SPS is key to preserve air power garrison and help understand the critical link between the use and infrastructure and Air Force strategies, but then take a less complacent view of international competition for years. The Air Force to take and kept the United States out of major war and kept the war from global conflict and maintain technological premise of victory and technological wars gives supremacy to all the face of conflict we must obtain. Technological supremacy for reasons of service trust where airmen consider the opportunity international cooperation provide and advance the U.S. interest partnership and other situation perception of a strong Air Force key global cooperation. The impact is instability and miscalculation equal and Berkeley 12. The Air Force must continue to build and maintain alliance safe represent opportunities for cultivating the association cooperative and defense has the advantage of focusing on desired regional effects of life associated with documentation leaders must have capability to interpret officers from 30 American digits efforts to the countless potential adversaries are only effective if they are credible allies committed to the United States depends directly on their perceptions or American presence failing to make such an investment encourage reasonable exposure to make least miscalculation ultimate conflict. Air power key to hedge development 6. Air power has American station metrics creates the convenient readily cost spectrum conflict power provides opportunity for discrete application of force form or risk control situation of precision revolution highlights opportunity for air power to pick up capabilities of the United States interest advances to technology make U.S. dominance and continually go on their aspect of combat power American air power prevent the edge consists by the cost war and facility pursuing it edge solves great power second sheet 11 of the United States possesses the combat military powers and the economy is one of the world largest the chance of no other states ability to challenge United States military access to the bandwidth of hegemony that due to these powers together which result in international world powers fuse American attention to be challenged whatever wars be harder for it as history tests will decline results of military competition political split trade financial mechanisms proliferate stable cooperative relation a close hegemonic world return of the 1930s reputation would fill would step forward to fill the gap left by Washington's with leadership major powers which compete for supremacy war without American hegemony is one great powers great emerge hedged inevitable Sherman Hurwitz 9 the U.S. life communication global affairs advocates restraint made on margins of policy bait the United States will continue to find its globally pursue strength requires military forces and independently air power key to Asian stability the impacts of global WMD conflict released in 1998 American air and space power being critical for deterrence initiation celebration of the harbor the potential for full-scale convention war air power be at the forefront of American military response because the vast nations on the Asian continent chemical biological weapon threats are the common future problems here in space functions vital rapid reaction force and breaking crisis Air Force assets become required to fill gaps in critical warfighting areas the Air Force assets will be required to fill counter the growing capabilities of potential adversaries and new non-traditional sensitivity scenario 2 is the air expenditure force the use of CBWs is inevitable only effective air expenditure force solves Hyper 99 the Air Force will increasingly call upon to help stabilize the chaotic international scene the experience Air Force key element in this process you adversaries deploy chemical biological weapons down to part of the arsenal spend the adversaries with a strong Air Force with a strong air expenditure force in that position these challenges and prevail without such a commitment to USAFE a chemical biological weapons disaster SPS is key to deployment of air expenditure force raw to key focus logistics combat deployment loads Air Force requires logistics it's an important part of agile combat support power with size supplies power to deploy locations to part focus logistics using power beam from the satellite to eliminate the generation the power generation and deployment of nuclear airlift power producing equipment is repeatedly singled out as the number one air intensive requirement for expenditure force deploying bioweapons lead to extinction oxygen 2K the biological weapons made without no cure vaccine or extreme nature you continue to fight for wildlife over the AIDS and Ebola devices just one small example can be matched to hundreds of such placing extinction now possible advantage 2 is weaponization it's inevitable and results in war with space bridge 12 the United States move towards militarization of space will change the face of war the United States public tactical guidelines on the use of force and space systems may be used weapons are undergoing weapons are going to test flights and security Dr. DOD said that in space activities are designed to maintain and enhance national security by the use of outer space the United States as well as other leading powers are attempting against purposes of space the United States refuses to support a resolution to halt militarization the United States and the European Union working on the code of conduct Russian channel likely to sign the soccer between military competition and the United States will intensify the cleanliness weaponization A's moves power limitations ROMs 2K solar satellite can supply the power 2 technologies to benefit lasers jamming devices lasers which would be part of the missile defense made difficult to send a power plant which can produce a part energy to power satellite and solar powered satellite people have to be in laser drone it's probably the limiting factor in generating enough power to energize the beam B some point the survivability maneuverability and reconstruction ROMs 2K solar satellites solar power satellites will provide improvements in maneuver force application radar communications on solar power satellites and enable reconstruction unmanned air vehicles and smaller satellites with full requirements for small faster and cheaper satellites the vulnerabilities satellites that lack maneuverability solar powered satellites will enable maneuvering for survivability and meet warfighter requirements this application force in space involves holding risk for targets in space and that's key to future Air Force space-based missions Mayberry 12 space the ultimate high gravity space energy the picture must encompass the energy required to maintain and enhance and operate space assets comprehensive space energy strategy promises enhance resiliency sustainability and affordability of future space systems may be possible broad missions from space and energy efficient management require significant advances in energy generation storage technology C space-based radar ROMs 2K a space-based radar requires large amounts of power radar limited resolution and coverage a space-based radar receiving power from a space source satellite limits this problem that's key to global space defense priority in a space sensors provide information to warfighter about the actions and intent of adversary sensors I said it will call informing an operator If a missile launch takes place in the defense system, should be alerted sensor killing loss sensor to pass information on that message from the other sensor so they can effectively pick up the missile launch and engage occurs when the weapon system is activated. Space systems by global coverage and wider search capability, sequencing solves an arms race to Oman in global United States with weapon United States technology in the other state will account for the extra costs too high to use investment before you have time for the United States to trench itself in space. The output of an arms race along the United States will deploy weapons versus promote the Korean War with urban now stabilize the international system for the arms race space to be able to deny when space warfare less likely so long as the state demonstrates capacity to will use the force black weapons future war space to promote the United States uses military space force that maintain control from low orbit. We view this global asset public the United States will clear aerospace for low all overdue burst of economic expansion scenario. One is China is developing an ASAT and that collapses Asian deterrence burst 913. The Chinese officials briefly cut its circulated in a terminal. This is an upcoming anti-satellite test space. China has sought to massive anti-satellite program China's successful deployment of missile defense with accelerated its military Asian confidence extended the U.S. nuclear deterrent and lack of U.S. response to China's space militarization collapses Asian deterrence. Fisher 10, a Chinese military expert stated that as long as the United States maintains military space non-militarization illusion, kill and develop assassin satellites used to locate target United States deep space satellites to provide information on missile strikes. As China was its intention to build capabilities, bombing, signaling, retreat, continue U.S. sacrifice to your nation should decide to increase its warhead, begin with nuclear term, lose credibility, China signaling, arms strategies will face two choices to counter China or obtain new military deterrence. U.S. leadership in Asia is key to prevent China's seizure of shipping lanes in the Strait of Malacca, Spinetta, in case tension could erupt conflict, regional repercussions, energy concerns from launch China, economy expenses to China's for will increase excessive pressures to secure energy. China spends on the linked to import oil vulnerability. China is allocating substantial resources with military expanding influence. The United States cannot seek control of the region's strategic waterways without incurring immeasurable risk of violating its failure to respond with checkpoints that critically important to global economic interests of the world. Pass through the Strait of Malacca failure, would we can strategic alliances with courage, economic arms race and the extinction of 2009, a depression strike war can follow nation collapse and trade flows can lead to miscalculation, imagining instability, manipulated region-wide, economic collapse worse than previous economic troubles that would drag America in. We have alliance responses unclear from American military already stretched to contain the crisis. And scenario 2 is North Korea. They're developing long-range missiles to counter U.S. sanctions. June 24. The North Korean threat to conduct nuclear weapons to derail hostile U.S. policies after bomb push. That means they will launch a variety of satellites and long-range missiles, long-range rockets, and carry out a nuclear test at a high level. The military thinks a nuclear test in the North is possible any time. And lack of missile defense allows North Korea to bully the United States hussy. In 9, in the absence of missile defense, North Korea will find Eastern blackmail. Of course, they're bullying the United States missile defense will be blackmailed. The defensive long-range missile cannot be powerful to confront North Korea. North Korea aggression against South Korea. No precautions of both North Korea effective missile defense too. The ability to strike launch sites in North Korea without what a conflict goes nuclear. This is chill. Korea remains one of the most inflammable global flashpoint nuclear conflict likely to become before any incident could erupt with the devastating TPRK U.S. war. The U.S. serving as a main theater worthwhile an incident could lead to war. A non-Korean war will be fundamentally different from the two world wars. The U.S. may not become the main theater of war. The nuclear exchange will begin with retaliatory ICBMs to detonating hydrogen bomb solvency. The text here. Against 12 and 20 experts in SP-related energy related technology areas, attended technology, then we find SPC completely destructing numerous groups found that large scale. This will power is feasible offer represent true evolutionary energy. And DoD is an anchor tenant, it's only way to get the initial investment. And SSO and 7, the number one driver requirement for generating the industry interest in developing the initial operational SPC system is requiring an anchor tenant to be willing to pay for SPC at a price of $1 per kilowatt hour. And demonstration of feasibility leads to common set of action for 10. Once it's clear that solids can deliver the energy, the common set industry will be there with the capital, regulatory, cloud management experience, and marketing skills, attorney, and price of a viable business. The major significant barriers to that technological governments can help assist with R&D funding, assist with demonstration, process, and VDD. Lieutenant purchase in the first product producing air power, Air Force purchase all from UK. The power being function of solar power satellite with the same frequency by launch can be provide downlink data transfer to space solar energy can emerge from global communications components where you can better transmit power. This would open up other avenues for the Air Force to receive power to deploy locations the Air Force can purchase. The electrical power for deployments are exercised as well as benefits are the same as mentioned in the logistic portion earlier. And $2 billion was just allocated to alternative full dry sheets and bed sheets. 315 bond introduced $2 billion trust fund to support energy. Research and alternative energy gasoline. Yeah.
Okay, first advantage. Where does it in the Garrison card say that solar power satellites are key to
That's the piece of evidence that says tech innovation is key. Our Ramos evidence talks about the Ramos evidence is what talks about SPS.
Which piece?
The Ramos evidence, second to last, it's right before OX.
Okay, why is it that SPS is key
Yeah,
to
the Air Force can't take off because all of their planes are too heavy because they have to carry fuel with them. The AF would be able to beam power to those to receivers on the ground, which can then beam into a
And
plane.
this evidence is from 2000, and the evidence that you read on the top part of this advantage talks about energy efficiency innovations within the Air Force. How come those energy innovations wouldn't
What do
be
you
able
mean?
to
We
make
still use
efficient
gas to
fighters?
power planes. That is our internal link.
Right, but if it's more energy efficient, then how would the
It
planes
doesn't
not
matter.
fly?
First of all, Donlin
Okay.
Schwartz, our uniqueness evidence, assumes this claim and indicates that energy
I
is
don't
targeted
believe
as a
it,
center
but
of
that's
gravity
okay.
because we do not have the ability to wage global
On
campaigns.
your weaponization business, when you talk about how, like your first card talks about all these issues as to why space weaponization will cause the war, and it specifically talks about political calculations in countries trying to vie for supremacy in space. How do you change those political calculations?
Well, number one, the ability to have lasers in space would probably send a message to China that if they ever attempted to go to space, we would blow them up.
Right, but that
Which
seems
is a
to
deterrent
be
factor, and if
contrary
they
to
ever
your
did-
bridge evidence. Your bridge evidence literally says the U.S. is pursuing weaponization, and that is exactly why China and Russia are trying to do
Well,
the same thing.
hold on. We think that it is the opposite. We have
Well,
tried
can
to
you tell
engage.
me where
We
it
have
is
tried to.
bridge
Yeah, the bridge last line of the bridge evidence indicates that we have tried to engage in the code of conduct where Russia and China refused to sign it, which has caused the U.S. to
No,
weaponize.
that's not what
also-
your card says. Your card says that the U.S. refused to support a resolution to halt militarization. They're working with the EU,
Okay,
and that
yeah,
Russia and China
yeah,
think
that is
they're
what it
against the
says.
EU.
One, we will contend we are weaponizing because other countries are, and two,
Right,
our
I
global
just
evidence
want you
indicates
to
it is
give me
irrelevant
a
who
warrant
weaponizes.
since your card says that countries are politically motivated to go to war over space, I want you to give me the warrant from any piece of evidence that says that you change those political calculations.
Dolman 12 indicates that the cost to go into space is very expensive, and few states have the ability to do so, which means that if we are the first country to get there,
Okay, so if the
we
reason
can
why other
prevent.
states won't weaponize is because they can't afford it, then what difference does the plan make?
What do you
People-
mean?
You
Well,
just told me
first
that
of
other
all,
countries can't
that
afford to
deters, that
weaponize
prevents
space.
countries like North Korea or Indonesia, which is another ability
Okay, so
claim.
then that
But
still doesn't
for
meet the
states
burden
like,
on
hold
your
on,
first card, which is China and Russia.
but for states like China, the perception that the United States gets there
That's fine.
first prevents them from.
You also
Going
talk
because
about
it
these
needs to secure a little bit
space-based radars. What is a space-based radar? How does it work?
Right, so these small satellites, well, they are satellites, and they would be able to send information to ground-based missile defense and other satellites that a missile launch has taken
But
place.
where are the space-based radars? Are those on the planes? Are they in space? Are they on the ground?
They are these satellites
Okay,
themselves.
They're the satellites. Okay, that's fine. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'll need to say that.
First off, topic A supports interpretation. It means within the bounds of Random House Dictionary 2012 used to indicate inclusion within a space, place, or limits. And B supports violation of outer space is in the United States Government 98. Outer space is certainly a foreign country. Outer space in a world of law for its own choice of law purposes. In Antarctica, the outer space treaty makes it clear that space will have no district. It provide a venue for clearance by non-residents in the U.S. And energy is in space. When Bukuzuka News in 2011, Kaku wrote the possibility of possibility for energy production, energy from space is called space solar power, and explores the topic lots of energy production in the United States international waters. The Arctic leading dramatically different advantage areas by direction of the topic is about domestic energy production. For energy production, how the U.S. explores and research for unpredictability, explores limits, topicality is jurisdictional question going for British competitive advantage based free interpretation. Next off is counterpoint text analysis for the government to invest in next generation bomber, the F-35 fighter program, the PC-46 Herald refueling tank F-22 modernization, long-range low observable carrier-based platforms and joint electronic warfare capabilities, the permanent defense for prioritized energy efficient technologies, the counterpoint solves your author, Evelyn, and Vicky in 2012. Bomb administration covers most prioritized recapitalizing its capabilities with the investment in next generation bomber, the F-35 joint fighter program, the AKC-46 Herald refueling tank F-22 modernization, long-range low observable carrier-based platforms, and joint electronic warfare capabilities, market capabilities, new aircraft, and energy efficient initiative solve Bartis. In 2012, the OD can find, excuse me. The ODD can find ways to conduct operations using less energy. Air Force counterparts these actions include investing in new aircraft, upgrading existing aircraft, energy reduce fuel efficiency, investing in deployed license that require less energy. And next, also DA solar supplies are strained solar panels will triple the crunch burgers in 1012. Lack of silver stockpiles control price silver minus secret significantly with past 2 decades gold demand for silver spar price gold prediction over the last 2 generations. Major government stockpiles silver have been sold off to supply the energy in governments. Well, silver reserves are finite over the past few years. Government suppliers of silver have been drying up. Government stockpiles feeding the market has only few other places to buy silver. New technology will continue to discover more additional applications for silver, putting a further strain on world supplies. Gold demand is expected to reach 150 million ounces per year by 2015 just to satisfy the photovoltaic industry. There's no doubt that silver market will have to face serious deficit. In order to massive deficit, silver will have to come from somewhere. And silver for PV use has declined. Now policies that favor solar PV will lead to boost in silver usage. Nano markets 2010 growth and use of silver for PV stream primarily growth is the PV itself, which has slowed and faltered. The PV is spread by government subsidies because that concerns about fossil fuels opportunities available for supplies. So silver and PV space are highly dependent on policy consideration. The economic turmoil of the last few years has increased in land hard assets like precious metals like silver prices have been affected by the strong economies caused overall industrial silver consumption to be less than robust and natural increase. The hustle silver use in photovoltaics and U.S. demand for silver will lead to U.S. to invade Iran somewhat. And 4. Has been made for solar holds and smoke. The metal local assembly can just find invading Mexico, Peru, Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina get their solar hybrid. There's 500 million ounce silver reserve in Iran, just at one location. After they suspect the control of that resource, funnel control is a prime motive for invasion. Attacking Iran caused full-scale war with Russia. Combat 2012, Russian responsibility to World War III. Russia progressed military intervention, maintained Iran becomes with its security. Iran's control reporters and extinction of Austria. Two existential risk emerging from nuclear arsenals. U.S. use SAR and nuclear mining to qualify as global terminal and annihilator species. Russian U.S. missile largely arsenals could be used in future confrontations. Small nuclear chains and existential risk. And next off is the Ceda. Freedom's takes on naturalization of the military is optimal mode of politics. This creates a cause witsy and political sphere that where war is only political choice, more second nine. Trying to control the planetary human activities and extension of the complete devotion apparatus of capturing all political industries will cause us to find policy state of emergency has been naturalized upon fundamental starting point of human existence. People of the nation are acquitted with that apply for more to force of violence governing names that entity constituted for the exclusive purpose of controlling some stable and safe stream by reorienting the energies of people towards warfare, the army and the state name as necessary for national material force that determines the constitution of humanity and swing lots of energies to channel to a single direction. The effects Roman notch production, not just war, very simple civil bias in the world, problematic war because very basic of the position we don't have the luxury of time decision to plan action include the immediate execution of political warfare, strategy, information in the state of constant emergency. It must now be identified as organized civil existence, in the state of exception. Self-justification for acting outside the normal order of democratic polity, militarization, representation, human consciousness itself, offload, and now one to another, so as to confuse any possibility of making clear distinctions. The political regime diminishes civil rights to the point of eventual erasure, and this creates a psychological priming for a conflict. Most probable explanation for probably go to war, shape, and views in bourgeois and for. Time choice going into the wartime peace, not violence, humans, people reducing social vulnerable to expendable, not person, there's risk in micro-organized and protogenitizable practices. Really, that practice are invisible, genocides not because they're right for our eyes, taking for granted peacetime crimes, such as the war crimes or ordinary everyday crimes of public consent apply systematically and dramatically in the extreme context of war is essential. That we exercise defense, hyper-vigilance, to everyday acts of violence, surrender, participation in genocidal acts possible. There's no primary impulse on which corresponds to genocide or bone is ingrained in the common sense of everyday social life. They harbor, bribing to push social conscience toward devaluing certain forms of human life, and the alternatives to reject the affirmative, the rejection of such spaces create discourse, alternative to the American exceptional military project, March 2nd 9. These scores more difficulties, for instance, meritocracy itself, militarity's character opens a pathway for awareness of its excessiveness and thus resistance. The paradox of military strength and the fragility of this visible excessiveness, the greater promise of development awareness of this pros previously existing discourse of modern liberal humanism, the visible nature of these scores of military should not be understood as lacking the power of the investment side of meritocracy, sisterization, and polity with the general concept of necessity since necessary to take this action because we are under attack now the Air Force Advantage. There's no threat to the Air Force's energy security and military readiness partisan 2012. There's no threat in the horizon the availability of bulk supplies, military fuel security. Some of the world's largest purchasers of petroleum, medium, so accounts for only 0.5% of worldwide petroleum production, only 11 million BPD. So, pure petroleum for supplies, finding inconceivable the U.S. military would not be able to success with fuels required to maintain readiness performance missions. And the military is growing, increasingly relying on INLSAT for communication, battlefield imaging. During Moscow 9, commercial satellite providers got more business from the military since the start of war in Afghanistan. The military's reliance on private sector satellite services is going over 85% of its global communications. A plan causes breakdown military communication SPS, interviews radio communication on frequencies used mainly by the military, listening at all in 7. SBS would harm the communication system depends on dense electron regions. The Iraqi influence from the SBS launches also interact with the ionosphere to reduce electron density and interferes with the weather could be altered in the troposphere due to the exhaust or frequent launches. Major concern about the SBS design was potential for interference in the electronic systems, electromagnetic systems, lead to experience SBS interference will include military systems, and no impact status quo retrenchment. Sufficiently sells global flashpoint history proves current McDonald 11. Many warnings about departure and current approach will be disastrous, getting the cars production would undervalued, but defense has confused with retrenchment with isolation. The production would not prevent the country from encountering dangerous threats. More compelling concerns that also might undermine retrench that occur U.S. superiority in conventional arms for sure the option to quick U.S. intervention nor is there good evidence of reducing overseas commitments would lead friends and rivals to question its credibility, just like glove prophecies which are often the Cold War near the doom NATO nor is credit the U.S. electoral pressure support a more modest approach to foreign affairs. So retrenchment would work since 1870. There have been 18 cases in which great power will slip in the rankings. Far from inviting aggression, the policy resulted in those states being more likely to avoid militarized disputes. This can pare back the number of potential flashpoints, increasing the odds of accidental clashes as well as reducing the incentives for powers to respond confrontationally. U.S. allies have little trouble protecting the vital interests. No state credibly threatens European or Japan. Regional partners have a greater stake in knowledge of local challenges to take on more responsibility. Retrenchment also allowed the U.S. to restore Western to its leadership and no transition conflict was on 21. The region mainly defensive and outlook, any potential hedge bound constraints, sufficient shared values need to understand global coexistence and cooperation. Regions will still provide a halfway house for economies to scale. There's some people like global trade or less. Ambitious world order with regions looking after themselves might remain peaceful, involve fewer frictions of risky institutions been naturalized across nearly all society teams over hedgemonic interventions with decline of regions more likely to more handle their own affairs. And nowhere economic interest, foreign influence, all kind of five. Economic and international development has been an industry to balance out spoils cooperation, scoring as possible to increase foreign involvement in spirit cooperation projects of regional security forces been playing stabilizing role. Bioterrorism is exaggerated arms control in 2010. The bioterrorism has been really exaggerated. Terrorists use biological agents presence major technological problem results with considered an unreliable form of warfare. Fictional bioterrorism exercise which use unrealistic values for critical parameters and unrealizable. They gloss over big real problems involved in acquiring, growing, disseminating on sufficient scale to represent a major threat. They also posit unreasonable assumptions about the rate of disease spread which due to outcomes towards and unlikely results. And that's weaponization. Multiple tech issues make SBS not feasible now. Matkins and 8. Handful of technical aerospace space solar power stand now. Highly efficient, high temperature electronic devices delivering precisely wireless power transmission, dramatically lowering the cost of space systems operation. The team low cost access to space must be addressed. And transforming new systems to concept solar cell efficiencies and progress from about 10% to 30% efficiency. Unfortunately, most space solar systems to design and require cells to withstand the high temperatures of concentrated sunlight. Weaponization not inevitable, different from other media. Other weapons can improve strength and hold and well. And 4. Arguments of technical determinism or human nature are popular. However, though land, sea, and air have become battlefields, no inherent reason space will become one, two in the very near term. Space weaponization not inevitable for the simple reason only the U.S. possesses the resources and capabilities that will be required to deploy space weapons in a serious way, and U.S. weaponization not inevitable to expensive worsen. And 8, the extensive costs to current U.S. space programs like SIBRIRS, the policy made U.S. pursue programs capabilities to ensure space assets protections their vital national security and economic interests, and SPS directly facilitates. And China can cripple the U.S. even if they want perfectly forward. And China would have to launch 16 ASATs. However, the United States made more deep space assets. Satellites, the U.S. may have the potential to spend on space force military activities, but it's also least vulnerable because of redundancy. China would have to choose to destroy the satellites that guide bombs in those, which really the order said they cannot launch enough ASATs to destroy human systems. Too many hurdles to effective space weapons, tech, space free, financial feasibility, hitchins, and 8. One of the most serious technological challenges in space debris, the Chinese anti-satellite tests more than 2,000 pieces of junk, high-fast velocities, making tiny pieces of dangerous ground station that reliably monitor objects in the shooting war, would raise spectator polluters based on all over navigable weapons and war purposes, technical obstacles, shielding space weapons against such risk being impractical, getting space operating. This depends between $2,000 and $10,000 a pound. Each would require replacement every 15 years, and that price not be cheap, and won't disrupt sea-led suicide, creating 2012. Closure of the SCS would affect the entire global economy. So countries interested in stability that at least fall China's given the importance of exports and energy imports coming through disruption. These same lanes implies mutually shared economic destruction, and that will moderate the behavior of participants who must continue to operate from a position of naval strength while small military disputes are possible, and the economic risks of the conflict are so great that significant changes to the status quo are unlikely. No North Korean war. Kwan, 2011, lack of knowledge is forced to observe to have it is established collusion based on limited information, resulting in transit skewed analysis. North Korean foreign policy concerned the characterization of North Korea is solely driven to sin. The hereditary regime of Kim Jong-il, the media will be charged with theories and cursory connection with the regime's succession of nuclear weapons until explicitly verified by documented evidence. This kind of analysis should be considered his misrepresentation of the young national interest. Nuclear weapons are not produced. His calculated long-term strategy to ensure deterrence against South Korean American forces. Archival evidence reveals South Korea possesses such threat through its sheer existence taken. This historical assessment accounts people should form the base for analyzing North Korean military diplomatic strategy first and planning, and it reminds the impression North Koreans are crazy. The contention North Korean changes the unchecked military reaction when it faces hostile international environments, not true. Sinking of China and Pyongyang must be understood within the context of North Korea's long-term military strategy in order to maintain deterrence, random attacks South Korea, and demonstrate the ability of military capabilities increase becoming necessary fact Pyongyang's military strategy. So clearly pursuing the purchase of Moana has all aircrafts and the American Apache attack helicopters with respect to rapidly tilt military activity.
Okay, ready? Okay. Let's talk about the top theory first.
Sure.
Which piece of evidence says that the solar power is produced in space?
The Hamazuka news.
It says that solar energy is produced in space. The rest
Energy
of it
from
says-
space is called space solar power.
Where does the evidence say that?
Energy from space is called space solar
What
power.
is,
So
hold on. So I think that this begs the question of what energy...
It also says another
Yeah,
possibility
that's
opens
fine.
for energy
That's
production,
fine.
which
Which
is
piece of
determined by the
evidence
resolution.
defines what energy production is and when that occurs?
Well, it literally defines. It says possibility opens up for energy production. Energy from
What is
space is
energy
called
production?
space solar power.
When does at what point does matter become energy produced?
At what point does matter become? You want to get into like the physics?
I'm
of it?
asking you when energy is produced.
When is energy produced? I mean, our evidence indicates in
No,
terms
not
of
in the
energy
context,
production.
yeah, just in general.
Okay, energy
In
produced.
terms-
Well, it depends. In terms of fission energy, it's the releasing of energy in terms of splitting the
I
atom,
don't think you understand my question.
or in terms of fusion, the
Next-
combining of the atom
next
also
argument.
produces energy, and the extraneous
I
versions
guess-
of the splitting of different elements.
What does it mean in the countercontext last line that the Department of Defense should prioritize energy efficient technologies?
It just means that when the DoD is making its decisions when it comes to different weapons technologies.
I guess my-
It talks about-
My
it gives a
question
list.
is,
It gives a
what is
list.
the net benefit to this counterplan?
It would be the silver D and
Hold on.
in case.
Energy efficient technologies sounds like it would be things like solar.
No.
No,
not-
it
no,
gives,
doesn't
if you
mean
want,
different
hold on,
types
it
of
gives,
energy.
there's a list of the investment opportunity programs. It talks about Joint Strike Fighter programs, air refueling tankers, modernization of long-range low observable carrier-based
I
strike
guess,
platforms, and
how
joint
does this
electronic warfare
counterplan
capabilities.
solve the internal link? Like all of those fuels are still fossil fuels, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Because the internal
So,
link to your advantage.
The Air Force still cannot.
It's
take
just
off.
based, no, it can take off. The
internal
evidence,
link to your advantage
yeah.
is not about-
the evidence talks
That
about
solve-
these.
That might solve the first internal link. Our second
No.
internal link is about payload.
No,
requirements.
our
How
evidence
do
in
you
it,
solve
yes,
that?
you let me answer a question. The evidence literally says that it leads to diversified logistic lines and airbase resiliency where they can mobilize different carrier battle group defenses because they have different capabilities to
can't
communicate
keep up.
between
Okay,
different
fine.
command and control networks, which
Silver
means that
DA.
they are more efficient energy users.
Silver DA.
Yeah.
What is the threshold for the link on this? Is it just like any new solar developments will cause the impact?
A massive boost in silver usage, overall industrial silver
Especially
consumption.
if there's the perception that it's key to the military, because that would probably further justify attacking another country for silver.
Okay, so it's the perception that we are doing solar.
Like our SPOI evidence talks about silver holders
We
for
just
cell
allocated
efficiency for the
$2 billion
military.
in subsidies for solar. Why isn't that true?
Well, like the Savoy evidence specifically talks about historically when we tried to find groups of earth elements for military purchases or military applications, then it justifies using fantastic amounts of
if we
power
invade
in face of
Iran,
limitations.
how would we invade Iran?
How would we invade
Is it
Iran?
like a military occupation with ground forces? Is it a strike? Is it?
Our evidence, well, we probably have to invade using ground forces eventually. It says prime motive for invasion. We probably would have to in order to secure silver platforms or silver mines.
Okay, so it would just be a conventional response?
It would just be a
It
conventional
might begin
response.
that way, but it escalates to a nuclear war with
Oh, yeah,
Russia.
because it brings in Russia.
Okay. Prep. Oh, boy.
right, so T. Oh, okay, I get it over. I'm good. All right. Okay. Topic: how do we be the planet that only produce energy produced in the United States, even if its energy in space is not converted to something else? Small, just 9. 8. Launch away solar plants in space, then solar energy once the low energy converted, then convert to electrons, convert into like energy alternatives that defend this we and we meet the purpose of using any assets modifies the word fine sometime down the direction of energy and counterprediction access means all areas under jurisdiction authority there. This uranium and 5 determining access means all areas under jurisdiction authority there. The production of solar is a conversion to use electricity as permanent energy and energy production to concentration of natural electricity finance on energy production crucial in creating application technology to change natural resources like use form for interpretation is negative and solar energy with negative but allowing that non-electricity absent predictability is most producible at the top of the base and simple negative structural limits and default to visibility competing completely really so to the bottom and it's also logical since it can't go to the weaponization. Now weaponization level is the point trend used to reuse Russia, China, and most actors pursue most of now to the 70s after through the bridge and space war and absent use and invention as a field and I think that use military force to prepare for transportation and they spread the opposite and this is the competition after the coverage economic variables was a launch and starting and nature to build the most force it will space of advanced space also come off 15 to 50 to proposal communication tells us to build the concept of the noble that agency tells us what for the use of the future force space also visual certain to the yes to develop the for the destructive defensive base to benefits of the operation to not the defensive risk to self protect the state channel right and incredible our perception of the channel will blackmail you it will straight the stream of Malacca which I suppose the nuclear war there effective is not the pearl strategy which China should continue which means that we should protect this is the only question. They say there's too many it's not a question of space mobilization but conventional anti-satellite weapons which would destroy satellites and they say this now it would be economic suicide but it wouldn't be they say the pearl strategy proves that they say North Korea war the last they say that's a new provocation by North Korea which means that it will blackmail the US
They said SPS not feasible to talk.
Oh, they say SPS not feasible. You should use it. The recent CR because evidence says the new divine over compared to second string the information they say there's no the not assume they don't get crisis down. There doesn't seem that the report would be done because he has the power that feels now. There's no selling for instance the NATO communication that's a wide separate from geo this person this separation is going to address like information like the to don't find which because satellite the concept of near satellites frequency allocation was created by the difference between neighboring nations and returns to concentrate power and proliferation of decency soon cascading proliferations which also involve higher levels of conflict making the world of dangerous placement to see that levels of military spending and innovation like the competition of supply support farming of client subsidy regions and critical stabilization gas successfully by between nuclear force the revolution of the end game the generate will have the local pressure to proliferation of the conflict agents and also contribute the stabilization affects new relations team more the number of the nuclear power goes to say there's no situation will assume that the US can respond with the Air Force and they see no viruses they see inevitably claim hypersense technology terms indicates that it will eventually be inevitably be a bioterror attack because of it's a low cost high magnitude impact. Now go to the hedge funds, great power, saying she left in the from the YCN will be jerked. It causes massive power vacuums in the US last show, which apparently caused an extinction of the free working show bill. And April False Challenge will multiply American power now transfer back to the Asian power vacuum. The disabling effects over presence of Asia to the Europe with question just because the the pylons could be visualized in the rest of the world of context and the rest of the press they would traditional can maybe choose to have more to new towards this or back the mode of mobility and states interest is the only way to raise human security, limit everyday injustice and make real change for this McCormick doesn't end there. This critical sense of the emancipation something to be honest, it can be cost of the world to go again. Institutions get control of the state steps set the limit for that which people might have control of the election, through their target that for official writing, that's common convenience, that's relationship is not control of the accountability, they critical approaches to effect from the ideals and for power practice of placing the opportunity politics against the effects of the investment for better friends this resolve accusations as the state centers are hollow they say policy that's reading access is when and there they do not preclude the possibility of not saying active effects from effects of the states which promise which effects further active and organization funds this is a change happens to the sense of because theory relations that's here central that's a because theory of course we see 3 cents again wait the official when the action place for purpose that's co-racially achieve a alternative the negative interpretation self-serving and arbitrary and when the executed fair and when sees rather than this sort of bill to see offensive and most important speaks there's thousands of ways to say to question pedagogy and they should justify speaking out one where they want to person get arrested and permission to the plan and no options what alternative and to the plan and all instances of the direction he and we should have consequences as it's due lots of positive also the consequences for probably the church community power the culture and people who are the left can be that they should bring it up and you'll consider for the most spring we'll talk to the journey with the last for fishing economic and the cosmic world sorry, what people see me like to be, but I never felt to see the pulse much into the confidence, and I smell the good and real day, more also into the sales, and so the purple lives in Americans, if we're in a school funds against also, they can see that has between devils down horses that use strategy devils to the question of the effectiveness down, even if they prove it's flawed or they point to be accurate, the only thing it doesn't do. The equator power of something you said, they don't feel confident, they make the calculate take out by this powerful does not determine the cause of problems for the behavior, the kind of operation, so it's the idea that they don't win, they get right another kind of planet, there's also just weaponization advantage, also since they orphanage, they tell one trying like they not something perception, the perception advantage, the perception means that the perception of the air force is low, the thing's not signal, because we just being an idiot for that ground also, and because Saul's asteroids, this is swap test too, it's possible to do the idea of these tech and like this and is that this is swap test point from a comment, that's our potential cash back the electric that's like a focus on nature, yes, we want to this will be this will be a strategy to report knowledge technology, we can get the budget for ourselves at the end of the day, the whole corporation, and these episodes and those also there, so there's obviously quite to sit there, the it would just also essentially to some these also showing in the most way they sell the centralization of civility sells also to show us bad and running issues was strategy because of the core instead of card also destroy that skills because these are responsible it was also a lot of what
Probably both.
also probably both selves let's do questions. Structure, this was also this is currently in 2012. You're not target the SR and I stand for lots of the focus on programmable airstrikes also and that has ability which would not attack the new one like a much airstrike saw these 5 minutes we have already known so this is reference 7 with strike to have easy generation of else will take 5 minutes to wait for one strike or the period that the doing all present at the go again that sells global proliferation of correction systems to we end up to that's the access for less stable to react no for the lens but not sales anti-American terrorist preliminary react for blocking the what hit on collision because they want to prepare a different power than that situation pro cause nuclear war the suck after the two powers proliferate yourself nuclear weapons to shoot well the probability of actually interaction to possible we're in the near the American one less but have an extra worrying to shoot and so striking ourselves as nuclear terrorism as a crocmare it doesn't for the country should be revolution wrong wait revolution not happen within the question of preemptive tracks of the worship that things on the structure later because machine will have new weapons terrorists who within the sense of life in this second terrorist distinction retaliation this is species and terrorist attack would lead to US political pressure to to weapons to increase the number of casualties and preparing political conflict strikes and also strikes to hegemony the multiple reasons declared as next for Washington the replacement of government would also include the Americans that they want to the world to the highest plan American firms they would wish to bear should retain for influence maybe a greater win they turn should feel to Washington for the chip machine for the refusal to mind critical Iran to establish with the facility safety of chip win exposing the inability of the Russia trying to counter American move now that the defense the game see that domination never will be that a couple of China's and devils rather than from Wednesday also know where we got ourselves as perseverance and 3 let's go for PA from the anti-nations inconceivable look at the entire structure and Western equal forces registered to play Russia well since that seems enough to judge by the Lord moving for the culture America Arsenal don't work in opposites by science and the Russian economy is perceived the economic crisis also additional reason why Beijing wars with the proud life was war they didn't have to take the social for the narrow force no war politics and science and maybe force custom the expedition with the agreement between the physics Russia no most of the interest of the Russian Federation the corporation who has this guy because he became a critical partner of the international relations.
You got something?
Yeah, I'm going up. This will be on the king. Ancient Europe says this is 1296 and they don't report the discourse of 1296 to reply different the constitution of the danger and the data of morally secret the practice of the all the gays of tension there's more revenue packaging possible is an active tradition of the to report the institutional material close proposal little context geographical context. I'll flash you this.
Yeah, good.
Do the flash Chris.
Yeah. You're flashing, right? So you should.
Yeah. Do you want this to you Monday or?
You can give it to them, start cross-X, and throw it to me.
Yeah.
make this we need argument on topicality, saying the energy produced up in the solar
Is
panel,
unusable.
well, it's not usable until it gets to the United States because it's not electricity, it's just energy collected.
It's microwaves, yes.
Okay, but your own piece of Wallach evidence, I quote right after you finish highlighting, once the solar energy has been collected, it is converted by the collector cells to electrical energy and transmitted wirelessly to
before
an
that,
Earth-based receiving antenna called a
first,
rectenna.
that's direct current.
I understand that to
direct
be made, it
current-
requires
direct current
microwave.
can't be used. DC can't be used. Only
Why? It says it
only-
converts it to electrical energy, but then
Yeah,
converts it
DC
to
can't be-
microwave beams in order to
Yeah,
convey the solar energy to Earth.
DC can't be used. It gets converted to DC in space. That's the above line which you did not read.
Okay, why
Then
is,
it's converted to microwave.
okay, it seems like,
Moving down, then
okay, it
it's
seems like
converted to
energy
current.
produced and electricity are two distinct things that your evidence even discusses. Why are they synonymous, or why should they be in the literature?
Okay, so Walsh made the distinction that the energy produced in space is not usable, and it differs in the term of art solar energy and solar power. We've also defined what solar power is. The Department of Energy says it's a conversion process.
Why, okay, it seems like that interpretation of electricity only being that form of energy produced would make things like grid apps topical, because
Why?
that allows for the production, that only allows for the new forms of production of electricity.
Is that a question?
Okay, I'm just wondering is what apps do you think like our interpretation necessarily limits out?
So we
Besides
think
SSP.
wind apps because the current
Why? As long as the wind apps are in the United
the wind
States.
did not exist in the U.S. It came from other coasts.
Okay,
We
but
also
our
think you-
interpretation
we also
isn't-
think you allow solar energy apps, so things like
Okay, but
solar
our
lamps-
interpretation is about the materials being collected. It's about that energy being produced. If a wind farm is in the United States, it
Yeah,
seems
but
like
the
that would
current,
necessarily
the argument is that the currents are not though. That where
Okay,
when
you made the practice.
so it's a conversion. So
All
we're
right,
not
that's fine.
talking
It doesn't really make sense. That's fine.
It does make sense.
You
It's
just
a
assert the
conversion.
prepositional phrase in the U.S. modifies financial incentives. Why wasn't that after the incentive or the restriction then in the topic wording?
Okay, so if you so it modifies the words in the U.S. because first of all, it's the financial incentive.
Well, you have it
energy
in the
topic.
U.S. modifying the preposition first, which is the production, the incentive or the restriction, not the other way around. So I'm saying, why didn't they just include it after the incentive or restriction in the topic
Because this is
wording?
grammatically correct.
It's grammatically correct. So if I were to say, Joey purchases gum to chew in the United States, you would assume that he purchased gum in the United States and not that he's chewing it in the United States?
I would also assume that he chewed it in the United States also.
Okay, so then why can't it apply to both?
I mean, that's an argument, but argument is that
Okay,
it first
that's fine.
modifies it.
All right, that's fine. Let's talk about the counterclaim. First off, what are all the theoretical reasons to reject the team?
Conditionality.
No, okay. You say that the SSP infrastructure leads to a bunch of new add-ons because of dual purposes for communication technology and laser fixtures. The counterclaim adds new communication platforms through more energy
Yeah,
efficient carriers. Why doesn't that also lead to
that's
something
all
else?
deflection though.
That what?
That is all the deflection portion of asteroid, which is even if you
Okay,
can
your
attack
evidence-
asteroids, you can't like.
Okay, where does your evidence talk about deflection? 'Cause it
It's
seems to be
it's
about
literally the
detecting-
last line we highlight.
Sorry, but-
Conditionality is good. Our interpretation that we get two conditional opposites that allows us to test the political implications as well as the epistemological implications of the affirmative is key to check against inevitable negative advantages and oppositional politics, political activism, necessities, process, and multiple soundbites quickly form a cohesive conclusion. Only conditionality allows that because it allows for comparison and contradictory policy proposals, real-world education outweighs because it makes the decisions that will become and at least the best policy option. The diversity of argumentation is key to inoculate a culture of dissent, which is key to cost-benefit analysis. It's better for research argument and diversity versus the attitude of research because the threat of multiple contradictory advocacies and it's key to negative flexibility between discipline from multiple angles. Key to fairness where the opposite can appropriate the persuasiveness of the TUI, there's no spillover, we could have just read more key violations, no impact pressure on the TUI, special choice and time pressure, and at worst, you just reject the argument of the team. And on the canine going for extended across the crowd, this is accusation, state is college means all whenever college means they can't continue to involve themselves, which across the permissions to test the competition on the counterclaim. Counterclaim's also negative advantage is also better, or it's also the air force advantage is also better than the outburst. They're also conclude that new weapons and flight systems, in addition, energy efficiency are key, not equally to space, unless one is the evidence. Two, even if it's true that renewable energy would be good for the air force in the long-term, short-term needs, include new weapons of combat logistics. Three, to voice the SPS turning the silver DA, he says that it won't be able to solve the second internal link. The second internal link is simply an issue of fuel efficiency, idea that we have too much fuel in our airplanes, which is exactly what the counterclaim talks will be able to solve for efficiency, solves more than the average near-term downlay of our ship. Reducing demand for energy, single best action of the Air Force continuously purpose energy security to reason for lines of foreign energy sources and energy commercial infrastructure, reduce financial research. The Air Force needs to commit to energy, increase the impact on base renewable sources, and have insurance that the Air Force has the ability to collect and analyze energy, target aviation fuel, expeditionary fuel, tactical, non-tactical ground fuels, water consumption, and installation energy without compromising safe safety and security missions. He says permit both, but permit both still links all the reasons that's why SPS would be bad, as well as several disadvantage and inefficiencies. A case turned new, a great energy plan solves, but their resources would drain, which would gut the implementation of efficiency downlay in our ships. The Air Force has developed a comprehensive energy strategy to feasibility manage spawn depending with the name its capability of race with double position cooperation to coordinate defense review and starter focus on operational energy management is now following process foreign systematic cooperation with information. The Air Force energy strategy plans along the goals of national security strategy to continue sustaining and enhancing particularly urban increasing physical security. The Air Force must diligently approach facility ready and to partially enable and incorporate the good operational effectiveness in air to enhance national security. He says asteroids, but every satellite launch just makes the problem worse. Taylor and Ceda. As specific future list of reasons, social alarming tender of increasing your research to the launch of multiple pieces of presentation going on avails to future NASA studies understand the cascade effect of increased spread those who said the phone doors increased cascade effect over the piece of cloud that the space after return, but green degrees but causing more collisions or failure to become self-generating makes their speech completely insufficient without any satellites, and there's no impact NASA no date, no human in the present testing, there's no video about the effects and the measure common currently collision with the use of the probability of collision quite small, no collision can be likely to start the effect of next 700 years, market years, and we just experienced for solar storm, and there was no impact on our amazing planet in 12. Resource faded the fierce eruptions of the services on the events of future of the earth, March 8 to 10, so solar and shot energy to the earth power in New York City for 2 years, caused pretty disruptions electronic infrastructure such as electronic grids and some expected on the this day. Service project right now with the client PV Solar has been ensuring that we have the supply sense for further endeavors to send jacket the veil would be possible without any run this volume in the case of the military folks. They have supercharged link because if they would that piece of truly the military, then would be no hesitation to attack and run the biggest impact. Bostrom says that it would be great for not the regional conflicts like the African faster time for more than bring now perception we would make us act quickly. It's more probable because we've invaded countries for resources before in case because military research costs on invasion the military is in focusing on developing new technologies industry and tech going forward. Look at this most of it over necessary war for Americans and without such stock up strategic defense application for several years on the implications of being able to durability which works these self-sustaining has to the ability to defend our shores over most principal metals race and strategic shortage will hurt us more than shortage of other strategic metals and insurance organization to prevent and isolates Russia as a country that will want to challenge the United States. It's only supercharges that decision and it would ruin the industry and Joki Solar and 11. Solar costs are hampering the PV industry capability could possibly become a system of 11% of the worst solar margin several military property solar PV stations that solar piece and solar margin fund side again and judge materials solar price within solar piece triple that it has 4 cents wide and solar costs close to half the solar markets that just the cost of third and solar costs squeezing margins for companies. He says that Iran strikes are good, but their impact turns out plot days and be successful clean war by the US, but our lack of silver will compound the problem leading to a messy and unwinnable conflict. Silver doctors August 2010 and 12. I expect silver supplies hit crunch time since strategic metal is used in vital communication with manufacturing wood war. Iran is asserted that demand for silver will get interesting. We have not had war in strategic medical wars when critical shortages things are going to be very quickly. He says that his vehicle will solve pearl, but air strikes won't be able to solve Elin and 6. Which should roll it off for air search so they're able to step back here for nuclear bomb to be put on the limited stuff as a real air search around nuclear is aspirants disappeared in the atomic facilities birth and replacement high level facilities for bombing will kill innocent pistol use intelligence and running nuclear pistol probably isn't that good in air strikes less to be that effective and there's no impact on top in 8. And the impact says nuclear programs have not been programs out they should be on the north pretest as both direction. The point is that each decision to embark on this sustained nuclear programs is contingent on particular security of their circumstances on their sound data was on the point to typical for this one especially the impact and predicted that thus were not that down with predicted but one smells and policymakers very cautious to the actions and extension that face validation predictions of individuals have vested interest and extension of the dangers of nuclear proliferation. He says terrorism but air strikes will actually make more terrorism than Elin 6. Because the bloody quick run the Iraq uses drills which are from unilateral American can take it runs your defense and also trigger terrorism and disrupt. He says there's no nuclear terrorism Miller intent. Even to spies that the chances are considered for 6 silicons fabulous 1 in million dots as surrounding Ceda had 20 hurdles of 20 times your chances each barrier when the theory can cause up to 1 over the real terrorist adjustments are scarcely likely to alter. Based on conclusion if only temporary 30% chance of 5 successful 10% odds are mine relatively small market is small. He says that the class is hegemony but that it would be bad good for hegemony but attack class is hegemony wolfish and 7. Attacking more also inclined attention to the police and skills for new geopolitical balance when she finds itself shut by Russia and China and the class hegemony using around insertion 6. This is just that runs in other time but the more likely calmly when a Soviet attack American news the American nuclear attack initially charged Linux to the higher because they found reaction from Iran and escalation the competence likely to friendly defense and concept predicting the nature of the crime will become widely predictable will have to happen to catch a consequence useful in the world and the eyes of the first world preventing nuclear attack and armies they scramble the home in American status to lead the civilized world we obliterated. You can't bring his US Russian war defense is all predicated fact and things like economic interdependence the whole that's why this were uniquely inclusive because if you have resources which changes all the calculations on economic interdependence and the use of oil and the economy of specific indicates that even if Russia and the United States generally cooperate they wouldn't cooperate for Iran because Russia has a vested interest in that region's stability on Air Force. He doesn't answer the barges. Evidence at the top indicates that there's no threat to Air Force energy security. He specifically says that we have over 11 billion BPD of secure petroleum supplies, which means it would be inconceivable if the U.S. would not be able to access those fuels. He didn't answer this. He says that he brings a piece of evidence on the satellites of it indicating that they are currently spacing their satellites out, but that doesn't answer the warrants of the LARC C1 and C evidence, which is not just a question of satellites, but also that it reduces the electron density, whether it could be altered and it interferes with other electronic systems, and the microwaves to shut down satellites using 5. And every single term of reversal effects are from disabling research of the satellite hyper micro interference with other components of the satellites retracted. The church has been particularly inherently vulnerable to attack, market attack, and also that in this post station, even if it's true that the capacity of the group out their satellites in the status quo, they have too many satellites to be able to do that, which is we or in this piece of evidence on the hedge debate. Hedge debate will complicating from return to retain sufficient military project or conflict history overwhelmingly disproves their impact with U.S. and lose credibility of the drone post-Cold War. The current development is excellent. He doesn't get enough credit to rethinking power rate retention since 1870, and each time it lowered the overall risk of conflict data. Overwhelmingly votes saying retention inevitable now, no impact for McDonald in 11. U.S. President went budget extra promotion gates announced that 78 billion recent dividends held to debate could trigger another 30 billion cuts of officials who are reducing the solitary advance and forcing to do far from working case retention would result in more coherence to abstraction paths. Here projects give officials are able to navigate the projects better reduction use deployments can modify use access to common functions and create cells to contribute more to the defense of retention and stability anything could provide breathing room for performance recovery increase strategic system renewable state market and overstated on bioweapons and lip-based. Destroys capability to carry the technical sections and make unreasonable assumptions about the capability to fire equipment, ability to disperse in the rate of spread, no chance that kills everyone, delivers impossible, Simpson, and 5. Terrorists cannot count and delivers this biological specific chains sensitive to solid humidity poolings in the air, and in the atmosphere temperature, human exposure, oxygen, 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 micromatrix, and be dispersed in either direct or right form, starting nature, defense, the common surprise, and sophistication, equipment, and a high terrorist organization, unlikely to possess. The alternative develop a wetlayer, which is hard to disperse, wetlayers can cause failures and undergo chemical stress that can 95% or more. The microorganism failure argument that he makes is that there will inevitably be a bar terror attack, which might be true, but the argument is that it wouldn't be able to, that it wouldn't actually be able to be deployed successfully, and wouldn't kill very many people, Simpson, and 5. And 96% of the cases worldwide where biological substances have been used, that 3 or fewer people were injured or attacked, and on Asian conflict, there's a shared interest in cooperation all occur in 5. The instant destruction of police revenge, outside actors include shared interest in economic development, political stability, and counter-terror, counter-crime, counter-proliferation efforts. This will continue to be the case as long as current incentives structures hold. The only twist the argument was that head would be the reason why we will turn. That's how the argument the government indicates that economic independence within the region is why, even if it's unstable, would never escalate, which means there's no impact on weaponization. He says they usually put lens of recency about our truth, but our country, even though it's from 2008, it assumes tech advances in the future and indicates that we're simply too far off. And on the weapon, he says that war would be inevitable, but they don't meet their burden. The burden evidence indicates that it's a question of political motives. They have to have a warrant or piece of evidence comes around to indicate that they'd be able to change these political calculations on. The China debate extend across their evidence because it's better than theirs and it's more recent, it's more qualified. The Chinese space competition will lead to an arbitrary script in 7. It's global space competition on President Arms 17 to become to be less than 10 Chinese leadership is mature attention to space book connected inevitable. It's constitution speeches 7 the damage by creating hazardous space operations second conditions by terrorism. It is destroying other nations, satellites, is burden, either China or northern Chinese embrace and race and redundancy means there's no impact. Chinese states as China can't station attack with destroyed to be effective for 440 is a PhD in research associated and MIT was at have at least 4 days notice 14 and 8. This country for linguists and missile launchers of all subjects with launch with large student to be similar to the open they preserve US by satellite is part of the attack on the launch. First one rocks to be told all about the appendix striking 7 cross our 4 9 is better than the case. North Korea that there are internal external forces that will keep them and that will keep them from actually escalating conflict and there's no impact. That's fine.
Okay, before we start, we don't have
Yeah, we don't have
any of the
stories.
story cards you read.
They're all in there. Did you get them?
I grabbed the wrong document.
I have on Answers to Strike Good, it just says pro-lift terrorism hedge, and there's nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
I'm assuming, like, if you look at my document, that there's supposed to be stuff under there.
Yeah, they're in
Okay.
mine.
Yeah, they're not looking at there.
I don't know what happened.
It's cool. I just, if we got proposals.
Alright.
Yeah, it is unfortunate in one safe in the Dropbox either. Didn't notice that.
I didn't know what happened.
Yeah, we want just, it's cool.
Yeah, nothing just.
Yeah, I did it turn CV. It might be because I had saved one as KU and then didn't, I don't
Yeah,
know.
the first chance you got was.
Because I had a TNC in progress and I might
Yeah,
be
yeah.
opening that one.
Your badass flash drive makes up for it.
Do you want to find the Dropbox?
I will attempt to do
There
that.
it is. Batman.
I know.
Oh.
Did that have it?
Checking. I'll close out of this document first. No, you should resave it in there. 'Cause
Does yours have it
It
now?
doesn't have it still.
What? Yeah, I have internet right now. If you just want me to email it to you.
that'd be fine. My email is,
I don't know why it's not.
that's cool. Chris Carey, CHRISCAREY 188 @gmail.com.
Mine's hunter.goh94 @gmail.
Go ahead and put me on there too.
Okay.
MWMU.
Yeah, I think I have yours.
Okay.
So. That's really weird. I don't know why that happened.
Okay, it's cool.
Okay, this doesn't work. Can you just have guys are from like a really old backfile, maybe, so I don't know what that would mean.
To and Z with pro-life story. We had a debate last week at the NJT where like I attempted to send this an email to the judge with the speech doc attached like 10 times and it never sent.
Yeah, okay, we got it.
I'll make sure we got it pulled
Well,
up.
I don't know what's up with the publisher.
Let me make sure we got it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
All right. I just want to ask about the link level of the silver DA. Why would we use Iran silver mines?
Because the uniqueness evidence indicates that silver supplies are tight, specifically in the United States. There aren't a whole lot of areas. The
I mean,
Savoy
why wouldn't we go to the place closest, like Chile?
Right,
which
the
has
Savoy
massive
evidence
silver
actually
supplies?
talks about that in the 1NC evidence and says that there are other places that have silver, but they're not places we could necessarily set up good trade, and they're certainly not places we could justify attacking, like places in South America.
We could just by attacking Chile, who has like no military.
No, not that it would be too hard, but that to justify a war with Iran would be much easier than to justify a war with Chile because there are other
Over
defense
silver?
interests. Yeah, the Savoy evidence in the 1NC talks about this and says other defense-related interests
All right.
with Iran would make it an easier sell for us to attack.
I think the latest unique evidence you have for this is like from 2012. Obama just announced a new campaign for clean tech investment. We read a card from the 1NC that said that he's allocated $2 billion to solar energy.
Yeah,
Why
and
does
it's
that take out the
concentrated
sad?
solar power. I didn't really hear most of these arguments.
I mean,
from
I'm
today's
making
maybe
it now,
evidence.
so.
What? Okay, that's fine that you're making them now, except the evidence takes that into account and talks about how specifically
But you're really
PV
old.
solar. No, it talks about how the industry has moved away from PV solar because
Okay.
they're looking to concentrated solar, which is what those subsidies were for. Your plan, because it's space-based solar, requires satellites, obviously, and those require
Satellites
PV.
require silver.
Yeah.
Also some real expensive satellites.
No, for the PV part of it, the photovoltaic part of
Okay,
these
do you read a
satellites.
piece of evidence that says that SPS uses silver or
I
PV?
probably would have if you
You
made that
probably
argument.
would, so you don't.
And the evidence does talk about that satellite solar would require it.
Where?
You had made an
Where?
argument.
I just want to clarify.
No,
Where does it
my
say
point
it?
is that
My point is I don't think you have a link in the F2.
I didn't think you ever pressed this
I'm
on
making-
this. You never made this
Okay,
argument.
I'm just asking for the link.
Sorry, quick question.
Yeah,
Does the
but-
counterpoint solve weaponization?
No, it's an advantage.
Okay,
of
cool.
Okay.
You should have made this argument because I would have
I
read my
made-
pretty card that talks about this. It
Okay.
says that solar power satellites have to use.
Every satellite launch makes the problem worse.
Okay.
The counterplan increases communication satellites, correct?
No,
What?
it's for flight and like
No, you
The
just
different
says that
plan.
every launch increases the level of debris.
every launch of satellites. Like if
Yeah,
you
the
were to
plan,
launch
the
a satellite
counterplan,
into
the
outer
counterplan
space,
text says you increase communication satellites.
where does it say that?
That was the 1NC cross-X, but okay.
It's about different. I just don't know where you're getting a lot of this from.
Chase definitely said that they increase communication satellites.
It's electronic warfare capabilities and a bunch of different fighter jets. By communication, it's talking about combat logistics between the planes.
Yeah,
It's not about
comsats.
satellites.
Comsats are satellites.
No, that is not what the evidence is talking about.
I-
These are
I
some, I
really
guess,
think- I
decent
really think-
arguments that you could have made in the 2AC, but you didn't, and they're also just unfounded in the
I made this
counterclaim text
argument.
and cards.
You guys started getting the 2NC, so I couldn't have answered this.
Okay. I am seeing.
Just saying the electricity will eventually be transported and also used in the United States after converting back from microwave being done enough for an act to be considered to be producing energy in the United States. A direct relationship to energy production being done in the United States. The only grammatical interpretation of the topic of their cards that they read talk about converting to electricity for the grid after it's transmitted by zero piece of evidence suggests no electrical energy is necessarily produced up in space, or that their interpretation allows for access should necessarily be discussed on the topic. Now, on the violation of the we meet the violation that the plan only purchases electricity from energy produced on the solar satellite platforms, which is then reconverted back to the United States for use on the grid. Something which must exclusively happen in the United States. The plan doesn't directly provide financial incentives for the purpose of United States energy production. There are lots for solar cell collectors to translate solar energy collected into actual usable energy. And whoops, you read advantages about direct satellite to satellite power. It's Ramos 7 is Ramos 2K. Using space solar power satellites to power other satellites in space, the power being will become all major element of spacecraft operations. And this in the United States modifies the incentive, makes no sense in terms of the resolution. It's logically redundant since the incentive by the United States federal government can only be given by the government in the United States. It's like saying Joey bought a piece of gum to chew in the United States. It would assume that the piece of gum had to be bought in the United States for colloquial use, but that he bought it in order to chew it once he was back in the United States. Energy in the United States refers to the previously mentioned energy. Cheap.com, no base source energy. United States voice and wood and water power. In the United States both includes and excludes includes a point of geography. It was formed in the States 2012. What is the United States? When using a geographical sense means the continental United States, Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Virgin Islands of the United States. Now, the counter-interpretation debate with the counter-interpretations problem they have are twofold. One is energy production in space and terrestrially. Solar electrical energy is produced in outer space first for the purpose of being and translated into microwaves. This makes them extra topical since they can get advantages off the power of space-based radar satellites and space vehicles. And principle, since they're not rooted within problems purely in the United States, decreases internet education, native ground, a separate voting issue. For reasons of fairness, two is authority for U.S. sovereignty does not mean they had any product that was U.S. made was part of U.S. territory, which is why we have to abide by other nations' laws when we sell products or construct buildings. Their interpretation of solar limits on the topic doesn't even require a modicum of territorial sovereignty, and energy is produced on the solar power satellites. We have our jurisdiction, June 27. Plus, solar power satellites are suborbital factory goals and global energy production based on solar power satellites. And energy is produced in space. This is distinct from electricity, which is substitutable. JSC 2010 SSP satellites like the power site infrastructure have significant impact. This includes all energy use, not just electricity. Electricity can be substituted for other energy forms. As electrical cars, energy production will increase. In electricity, energy production distinct specifically in regards to solar power. They convert into radio frequency for the grid. Multiple steps boil in 9. California's biggest energy utility announced the deal to purchase electricity from plants that being powered on Earth from outer space. Solar would generate the power using solar panels in Earth orbit, converted to radio frequency transmissions. From there, the energy will be converted into PNGs. These power grid energy is obviously produced outside the United States, generates 4 extra hours than in a day voucher. And to attempt to make solar power cost more cost-effective, decrease the number of hours of satellite solar farms specifically increase energy production with 4 extra hours of sunlight each day, and are facing procurement and purchasing legal issues specific on purchasing energy in the United States. OJSC in 2010. Legal issues facing SPSP are raised by SPSP's power contracts to avoid those contracts can be used to satisfy targets for renewable energy, like more conventional renewable states claiming this power be produced to meet those utilities providers of qualifying energy, and space-based solar moves this energy production enterprise outside the United States. Qualified experts confirm Popper and Potter 97. Solar power satellites could supply the Earth with electrical power, cell power satellites that offer efficient which energy production moves off the Earth's surface, and energy production is conversion from primary to secondary and a narrower is incoherent. Garcia and Martinez for the growing and diffuse limits of what can be considered energy mix also drawn an equivocal definition. Energy production term energy production encompasses all products that convert energy from primary energy source to secondary energy source that form their own Department of Energy interpretation. Also allows for the interpretation of energy production within solar-based satellite. The definition talks about solar-based satellite produces a heat, which is a byproduct of the form of collection of energy, which necessarily means that the transmission of microwave beams back down the Earth would also be considered a form of energy for them under their own interpretation. And their own Wallach says the collector cells convert solar energy to electrical energy in space. Here it is. Collector cells electrical energy transmitted wirelessly, and we allow for plenty of other solar asking solar, air, wind, nuclear, fossil fuel, etc. would be topical as long as the cells do energy produced from the collected heat, light, or wind would be exclusively within the United States territory. Any definition of energy production of solar bells is a question of how they directly increase and not de facto influence energy outside the United States. These interpretations attempt to define thermal conversion as already been clarified in the literature. This is one in our OJSC evidence. If we support the solar energy production outside the United States, is the creation of a litany of different advantages that are unpredictable. Arbitrary interpretation justifies shifting goalposts, which expose the topic of moods education and the resolution also limits and ground advantages based on actually increasing the direct solar production in the United States, not just the process of using the sun to convert energy wherever. Their interpretations either arbitrary or links to the ground limits arguments, and the energy produces in geostationary orbit. Space can 12 states card satellites can place geostationary orbit. Geostationary orbit is very above the Earth, and geostationary orbit is property of UN because Macaulay reporting 84 hierarchy of authority servants against the RQ1 competition, especially keen in the slot zone by the UN means that there's a legal question for SPSP, OJSC in 2010. Neo slot rights, another major legal question. Who owns the right to slot located in geosynchronous orbit? Use SPSP satellites energy produced over the equator. Who owns the satellite? Space treaty does not allow for the allocation of orbital satellites as national sovereignty. And no limits debate. Our dividing line is that this type of energy production must actually be captured by technology and produced within the United States. To limit the resolution ace point, allow for asset purchase to enrich uranium from places like Russia and China, then use it to power the grid and gain advantages off the act of cooperating. This is supposed to stop by many thousands of different international actors to enforce the mechanism for licensing designs. Peace point also allows for Chinese solar platforms allow for U.S. grants to plan that uses them for electrical vehicles, so then be topical would defend Chinese infrastructure and grants. Our interpretation allows for app flexibility for direct application of solar power, which make the topic reasonable. Limits your good ace points, most logical significance, one main issues, minimal constraints, inherently increase mean base points, precursor education level. Focused education is parental limits determine the direction of productivity learners. These points studies proved in the RN 9. A real study reports that fewer topics of depth advantage over more topics. Students who master critical topic will impact twice much so touch every topic. These points, small schools, small topics minimize research disparities, narrow research pace, allows more level playing field. Now the ground debate, they have to control limits to ground advantage solvency and counterplan ground advantage to be able to test energy types like solar power specifically for energy produced inside the resolution because of things like markets and infrastructure. They export solar energy being an indirect part of the production, thereby circumventing important negative topic literature today's fluctuations of the solar market privilege. These ground arguments over flexibility arguments have solar room for aspects and eligibility without narrow numerical limits mechanisms. As long as they have energy production that's actually applied within the United States, as if in a control supply and text speech first and last. Also, balance seems also slant the win percentage of the negative because the 1 error is meaningful speech. Human error began the F was more than 3% of the time. Proving a structural F flex is based on reasonably limited topic and nuances more productive than one-shot aspect. And always just explore new unique districts, find more specific plans of hard to counterplan new aspects found late in the season, which I'm fairly theories, resource late in schools, no politics today is going to be answered by topic agenda cards more important. To control the topic now, the reasonability debate, they don't meet their interpretation reasonability from when any limits or topic education arguments is subjective.
It is possible to quantify debate should emphasize Wikipedia plans to encourage debate. As for education, judge debate should undermine the integrity of the topic for interpretation, only reasonable interpretation of the topic also expose limits dozens of exceptions necessary and types of interpretation has to be made to expose the topic. It's predictable because while literature is while literature based is unpredictable because of a narrow focus on limits not adequately be able to debate, which means to get no specific in our education. We don't get any diagrams, we can test counterpoints. They literally defend the infrastructure and investment of a litany of different types of countries. You never have DAs against it, so it's unpredictable since there are 1,000 different types of actors which necessarily defend as long as the incentive has been within the United States.
Okay, I want to go 9, 13.
We meet the plant creates incentives for energy production. Electricity is not produced until it is beamed back to Earth. That's all. That is all of his examples. What does he ever say that the state the word power, not the word solar power? Power is beamed from space, but the power is not used because it's not collected. The great more atoms log in global receiver Earth return the microwave replaces beam to use electricity. More atoms gentlemen in global more efficient way to get solar energy is long silence. What silence can capture energy change to another wavelength and set to be converted to use electricity. More atoms would in total sound level collect solar radiation to convert the power that's generated to electric beam. This would in electricity into the receiver at the ground will be converted back to use electricity. Now the counter first is jurisdiction. The United States means all others under U.S. jurisdiction. First, the definition is contextual arguments the distinction between their rights. Now, it doesn't make sense topical if we would need our value with the planet back and we only buy electricity from people who happen to get that solar from space. Now, even if extra topical is good because they can pick out of anything that we add now, or we decide to now we own space promo 12 the OC does not get questions built to regulate object in space. Article 8 provides jurisdiction over object in space for science and the nation whose space objects carry private objects and probably own space or subject to jurisdictional laws of the country carries. Country carries out objects to speak. Now, second counter-interpretation is only electricity which use lots of DOD prefer because it's in the context of resolution. Here is more of a scholar tells us 7. Power means converted with the sun's race electricity, solar energy is more. Interpreting any technology converts the sun's energy to a form of energy. Now, the predictability this had, predictability is double because caseless pre-rock prep and conditionality, back loss in last year's high school talk. You also don't know what to say now. They don't link it. They have made it harder because their interpretation said anything that is energy and heat is topical, which means that things like the solar anus are topical, which makes it worse and harder for you to debate. Hard debate is good turns to education arguments, force them to think critically and adapt to new situations. Key to activism outside of the debate round and turns our class and skill arguments area half on them because they already have the block generics, which means larger tops down food, more firm is key to get our foot back in the door. Around first snap ground, their interpretation excludes Apple wind and soul because the initial currents come from other places. That was which means that they're not topical in their interpretation. Second is negative about our interpretation excludes solar energy affirmative. That was above reasonability, good is good enough. We meet our own interpretation because we are sufficient. If we have a piece of evidence that indicates that the electricity is converted in the United States, not go to the Air Force advantage. We are not. When you go for this, we'll see the hex doesn't solve power. There's no impact to my weapons, but I'll answer her jamming arguments. You said that only one example. All studies prove there's no jamming more after traumas. In 2K science, suppose there was not potential for interference. Jamming sensitive to the high. It would not be strong enough to interfere with telecommunication. Supposed to research civil frequency or communication interference. No issue. Result go to the counterpoint. There's no it doesn't solve any of the affirmative now. Because we consider our Air Force events. Also, there's no impact to their efficiency arguments because if consider our if we want to tech arguments that we produce 24/7. Covered now. Instead of add-on, we solve Astro because these are small satellites. They're considered internally, which we put detection technology on them. Clauses. Essentially, the evidence just says it would happen a long time from doesn't matter magnitude. Frame your impact stage because the magnitude is so high that we literally kill level make or the level. She says reboot SPS power clean up NS 7 I still solar satellite infrastructure would open up possibilities. Solar will be available or would enable concept of the deorbit space. We now go to the weaponization via resuscitation frame. The text they've conceded. Mannequins has a new design of SP South, which is pedal design, which increases the efficiency. They're not extending the articulation of any reason why tech doesn't exist, which means we get new to articulation now. And then we go to A, solution transfer for evidence, bridge evidence from one of these sites, internal U.S. documents, and we will not sign the code of conduct, which means the space warfare system will successful the app, and the app can get there first and solve a sequencing which all start on stolen evidence in case we get there, and educate size for the cost of what the futility to pursue, which means that space warfare never escalates. Now, recently, they've also seen the internal security documents indicate that the DoD will act independently of Obama, which states now China has assets in South Korea. That's the China scenario. They need access to energy to provide advantages because they have an increased population, which means that they will target Strait of Malacca, which shuts out U.S. shipments and cobblers trade, which means another their defense about interdependence clauses does assume a world in which we don't have trade talks with China. North Korean skirmishes to escalate, which forces U.S. to retaliate. Absent BMD will not be able to we will not be able to cooperate and act to de-escalate conflicts that happen in North Korea. Don't go to the sober disadvantage their perception. No turns case argument because we decrease escalation. Yeah, we are impacting this. There is no firm case argument to the magnitude of our asteroids out and weaponization can come first because the plan will be able to deter the country now. Now go to the impact on the recent Shisha frame of strikes debate. They have their own evidence. Their own evidence indicates that it's about strikes, which means we have offense Conway and Columbia defense leaders have increased the concern about preparing to take military action against Iran against the nuclear program in the process. Now the strikes there are voting evidence. Only recent evidence by all this question, which indicates we know all facilities we have to target, which are Ankara and test. They're all above ground. The strike will take 5 minutes. That's the telegraph evidence. Now, the impact at first is the polar debate. I don't think they have an answer to the strikes also because it sends a signal to everyone that there is a red line, and if you cross it, we will mess you up. They will have evidence indicates 20 nuclear weapons. People are countries are pursuing nuclear weapons in the status quo. All escalate to extinction. Their evidence just indicates the Pakistan will get nuclear weapons. That's assuming people. Here's more evidence already. In 2K6, there are some that will add nuclear Iran can afford to be sued. In Syria, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia, Venezuela, more. The democracy is part of this is only a matter of time before these shares will will slow down research and production more globally. Send a message to the rest of the world, even if the United States clearly case into Iranian blackmail. Facilities will cannot allow not to develop nuclear weapons now. The terrorism evidence indicates that a revolution is coming in Iran. Will come around and it's inevitable, which means that the terrorists will have access to Iran's nuclear weapons. They'll use them against the United States. The United States retired their nuclear evidence just says that they don't have assumes that they do not have access to nuclear weapons. Which does assume our impact to them because we would give them access because they have control of Iran's government. It means the United States retires because of public pressure. We have conceded snare extinction use more evidence. London in the final regime that was having called to intend state power. Actually, wanted to its way both home and possibly considered that that's we failed. I think with the name around policy, even though there are really simple support challenges we face, we cannot win so long as we have limited actions in a single theater. The only questions are how long. The only questions are how long it will take us to face it. How effectively we will be when we finally decide, given how terrible the price will be for long. Now, there are arguments that at least the terror is really bad evidence, and here's demonstration safety, especially like the critical regime will be able to produce an expertise in holy wars as an automatic company does cars.
They presented a single piece of evidence that energy cannot be produced on the SBSP. They have two pieces of evidence which say that electricity is produced on the satellite and then transformed back to electricity after it is being the earth purchasing. The energy produced elsewhere explodes, and we're vast on the topic. We're not talking about material collection, but the moving of energy. The a litany of affirmatives that were mentioned in the 1AR not responded into the 1AR, such as nuclear power in China. We purchased the AGU and then used it to power our grids. The actual energy production was incentivized in another country, and they can only do any domestic-based construction arguments and gain advantages based on another actor. On the single act of cooperation, there are literally thousands of different actors that they could defend. We purchase energy from to use on the grid, which makes education garner, despite the fact that that makes the face unpredictable. They have no disadvantage of reading a solar app that is solely terrestrial U.S. solar. The impact of this is limited, which I don't think the 1AR does a very good job explaining. We have a very clear dividing line that has to be the heat from the sun must be directly captured by the technology, and the sun cannot merely be a part of the process. They've conceded for two reasons that they unlimit the resolution. The first reason is for the things like uranium and the HEU stuff that I talked about above, and that it would allow for things like Chinese solar platforms. There's absolutely no defense as to why a limited topic is. There's absolutely no arguments with 1AR as to why a limited topic would be a bad thing. He's conceded the first reason that it's more logical because the significance of one of many issues is minimal, not the constraints that we would necessarily place on the topic would increase education. He concedes that it's a precursor to any sort of education or fairness argument because unfocused education wouldn't be productive. They also concede the Arrington piece of evidence indicates that studies prove that depth is better than breadth, and the fact that it would be better for small schools, and that it's specifically better late in the year because by voting for the affirmative, you would be justifying sketchy affirmatives that could be broken at later rounds, Ceda or the other two, which would obviously be bad and distort the lit base that people will work hard on throughout the year. The first argument that he makes in the 1AR is that electricity production is necessarily a good thing, but first of all, the plan, just because the plan talks about how the energy and electricity would be in the United States, that's not sufficient. This was the 1AR argument. The plain text isn't sufficient for a couple of reasons. The first is that I don't even think they really need this interpretation, seeing as they're powering airplanes that aren't even actually going to be used in the United States necessarily, which is the whole part of their first advantage. Second of all, they can see the argument that we make in the 1AR for the Ramos evidence, which indicates that it's direct satellite to satellite, and their Wall evidence talks about how it's a wireless transmission, which means they don't even mean their own interpretation on the we meet debate because the electricity is actually produced in outer space. So even if you buy that energy and electricity aren't necessarily distinct, they still don't meet that interpretation. The third reason why they would be losing on this debate is because they've conceded a litany of evidence as why energy and electricity are necessarily distinct. They can win all over the place that they necessarily get the electricity in the United States, but that doesn't mean that they win this debate. The OGSC evidence indicates that there's a clear distinction between electricity and energy because electricity is substitutable, whereas energy production is not. And there's a reason why they said energy production. This would also be bad for the topic for things like oil ash, for example, because those aren't generally electricity ash, which means that their own interpretation would be bad for other types of energies as well. The 1AR we meet the water evidence, which talks about usable electricity, but this is another thing that they wouldn't be able to meet because this is in the context of putting it to the grid, which is not something they do because they use planes and satellites. If it's not usable until it gets to the grid, then that means they wouldn't be able to solve any of their app because the app is all predicated on the powering of the radars, and which is what they said in the 1AC of the cross sections, how they function by having the heat and the light waves necessarily being able to power power the solar raiders and the satellites. If they win this part of the debate, then that means they wouldn't be able to win their athlete. And then on the counter-interpretation debate, he says that it's a question of jurisdiction, but he looks over all the good and qualified evidence that Chase agrees. And one are the first is the Johnson evidence, which talks about how energy production is on a suitable orbit factory, which is inherently different from things, which is something that the United States doesn't have. Any sort of jurisdiction over the OGSC evidence is also the best evidence in the round because it talks about how the United States has literally been sued for trying to pursue these types of SPS things because we clearly do not own space. It's the way he takes his card to card, just talks about different types of articles and different types of treaties that indicate that the United States and other countries might be able to one day get into space. It doesn't indicate that the United States necessarily has jurisdiction over space. It also doesn't mean our interpretation of the one incident that talks about what the United States is. And it's not a question of what we necessarily have jurisdiction over. It's a question of what is in the United States because this would simply unlimit the topic to a whole bunch of different areas that the United States might have some sort of territorial gain or jurisdiction, which is the reason why this interpretation is bad for debate, and they don't need it anyway. They've also conceded the Space Canada evidence and the Kelso, which indicates that questions of geostationary orbit prove that we don't even have jurisdiction over these areas in the first place, and it specifically talks about how the UN is the entity that would necessarily have control over this. They've also, the second counter-interpretation, which I'm pretty sure is new in the one area, so you probably shouldn't give a lot of weight, is the DOE evidence is a contradiction. There are other pieces of, what you want to say this morning?
Oh, their piece of SCLAR evidence says that solar energy production is electricity powered on the grid, and it excludes things like heat or any transfer of energy.
Exclude things like heat and transfer
But
of
the
energy.
DOE evidence talks about secondary forms of energy also being electricity
which is, I get it, it's about the heating evidence, which is specifically about when he concedes the Garcius and Martinez evidence, which indicates that it has to be from primary to secondary, or else the topic is incoherent, which means we have a specific impact of this counter-interpretation, why it would be bad for debate, and make the resolution incoherent. He says that particularly it's inevitable the cases, but this is obviously not a good standard. Second of all, the breadth of research is still based on the topic. I could upload anything I want to the cases, but that doesn't mean it's topical. It's not just a question of whether or not we know what they're going to read, but of what we know effectively how to respond to it, which is only good if we have a resolutional basis for it. Also, the limits arguments that I made about that he does not respond to the one error reasons as to why they would necessarily be bad for predictability and bad for education. He says that it would be harder with just things like energy, but first, both this is ridiculous because we don't exclude electricity, which is the word of his argument. It's just that electricity is not enough to meet the topicality, the burden, the resolutional burden, and he conceded the Martinez evidence, which indicates that this would necessarily make it incoherent. The Walk evidence also talks about how it would be wirelessly transmitted, and you should prefer the negative. He concedes all the reasons as to why they get the first and last speech and the persuasiveness, and that there's a higher than 50% windbreaker, which is the reason why you'll air name these questions, which means it's not just a question of hard debate being good debate, it makes it impossible. They conceded the Arrington evidence, which indicates that we don't get educated. They've also conceded that our limits makes it better for them to be affirmed because it allows them to have more creativity, and it's actually better it allows them for more creativity in things like unique structures, which means they have conceded that you should air name on these questions. They've also conceded that it's better for the affirmative in a world of the negatives interpretation, which means they have no offense or any way that they would be able to get that way be able to win this bill. They've conceded that they would necessarily be shifting the goalpost in on the extra T violation. What?
Extra T? Have you said extra T?
No.
Oh, extra topicality, they go beyond the scope of resolution.
They go beyond the scope
because they can power satellites to satellite transmission.
The Walk evidence talks about how this wirelessly transmitted, which means they go beyond the scope of the resolution. They conceded that this is an independent reason to vote against them because it means they get more offense on the reasonability debate. I don't think it does enough work here. They said they conceded that it's bad for debate because of judge intervention and that they don't even meet their interpretation because they conceded most of the limits debate, which Jay said that they wouldn't necessarily be reasonable and that would be bad for debate and competing interpretations.
I don't think they extend any interpretation or they give us as why space creates energy in space with respect to who we are. It was based upon allegations. Their only argument is that our this is bad. When there are to make a distinction, the issue they're asking this question now. Ellen started her ridiculous abs, her first substantial check cells and where argument. Also, there's no literature for these bad abs. Also, we have jurisdiction, where the counterversion of jurisdiction solves all these authors because we don't have jurisdiction over things like in other countries. We said we with those abs now. We'll go for the first meeting we argument that their interpretation of the athletes increased energy production in the United States. Both teams agree that the production of energy occurs when something is converted into electricity. That means that we win that are from converting electricity on U.S. soil. The only debate. Now let me explain how the afterwards voting act means the Department of Defense would buy usable electricity from private companies. Private companies would then synthesize new space outer space and solar panels on them. The satellites would collect microwaves, a form of energy. Then the energy is beamed down to Earth, where and received by antenna. These antennas would be placed in states and across the U.S. There are wall satellites which would not respond to all indicate that is then how these microwaves are converted to usable electricity. Even if they are winning that some conversion process into electricity in space, this electricity is not usable, which is the key distinction which solves the Lewis argument. It's not usable because it's not meant to beam down to Earth. It can't be put on electrical grid because even like the microwaves, it's trajectory, which are our first wall card makes this our first wall card makes into the alternate currents are the only thing that be used in the existing grid because other DC currents have been grandfathered out, which means that we have the only way which solves all their Muslims and Muslims. And anything that when that energy is produced in space, they don't have a link to their Lewis stat because the two arguments give you a reason why including disputed territories would explore the topic other than space. The only disputed territory in the Earth's international waters probably isn't a literal hours above on putting solar panels or within the ocean means it often game over. Also, you should be the planets in a vacuum. Just as the duty purchases solar power that's producing the United States from space solar power. The fact that there might be a conversion process are relevant because it is not a mandate of the plan. Not only for the counter, the second counter prediction, our counter prediction. The United States means all areas due under U.S. authority. I don't think they have extended interpretation with the United States means between two air out this question per this definition, which connection or the space. It seems that between the continental difference and the legal difference, U.S. code dictates that including stringent mandate. And even if the abstract space is protected around this, we see that the only piece of evidence that we have in the money are our Perlman says that Article 4 of the Article Treaty says that we have jurisdiction over objects that have launched towards the FAA would have to approve of launch licenses for these satellites to go in space and create antennas, which means that our name is on the U.S. is on the UN signature. This means that we have legal jurisdiction over the satellites that we be sent to space. Also, plan and vacuum checks in our argument is that there have been legal disputes, but these were questions of sovereignty, not questions of jurisdiction. Even if there have been past attempts to claim sovereignty in space, these are not a jurisdiction over space, which they have conceded, which should be the frame for the USB data. She says that Geo disproves that no jurisdiction, but first of all, plan and vacuum. The plan's not mandate that the satellites go to Geo secrets over. They can be in low Earth orbit or above Geo, which is unfair territory. Also, yeah, plan and vacuum check this now. I want to actually check before the limits now. They've conceded the only argument made on the they can see the only argument on the side, which is that first of all the limits which is an explode topic, and it's good because they get word pick, which solve any flexibility. Now go to the second counter interpretations of the energy question. Both teams agree that the production of energy occurs when microbes are converted to usable electricity. Any conversion process in space is not usable. That was above. We meet the interpretation is that the term solar energy and solar power are distinct. Solar energy is anything related to the sun and heat between people. Anything can be solar energy, which magnifies our links or to limits means that the alternative energy you guys do there or counter-operations of thousands of unprovable out. This outweighs a few examples you can see either our key distinction. First, extend the usual extend DOE and the depression of energy in terms of solar power happens when usable electricity is produced. I prefer the definition comes from the government, which is the only stable, predictable definition to create connections to the community now. It was not in the way we are in the 2C. It's also for the topic actor, which proves it's more precise. Like in Sklar 7, extend the difference between solar power and solar energy that was above. Third is their own offer evidence that satellites supply electrical power on the Earth. It's not connected with the phrase solar power and solar energy production. Now, for their Garcia Martinez says that the energy production is the conversion from a primary to a secondary source of energy. Where the primary energy production is microwaves collected in space. Even if some conversion happens in space, it's not usable. These microwaves are being down to Earth to rectangles that convert the primary microwaves into secondary forms of electricity. Now, this also says that it is impossible to draw an unequivocal definition of energy production. It means that if T is a tie, you default after stability because also the Clay level factor OSDJC arguments made their sense, but we went through the same tradition energy production. Garcia says that as a production in the context of renewable energy is usable electricity. For other energy sources, the evidence says that we will use a different interpretation. It means that after still topical interpretation, not limits debate. The internal limits are the OSDJC evidence says that introduction of solar power is anything is any energy process related to the sun. Extend my examples extend the power scale from above. Even if they add a few apps, they add more. Anything is energy under their interpretation. Now, next defense, she frames the loose state wrong. If it's true that predictability is the question of being ready to respond to the app, then our defense of the caseless backfiles from last year and Imperial Pet means that you will be ready to go. Then anything that's enough to get conditionality, which is also hard to make. It's good to make. Even studies show that that we turn their skills arguments, adding a few apps to force them to think on their feet and next to the control into critical thinking skills, which is the only unreputable skill. She says that they could say it limits you creativity. This is false. Confining means we can never experiment out new creative definitions. Also,
portable skills and critical thinking outweighs small skills.
Portable skills and critical thinking outweighs. What?
That's a theoretical
impact. That's a theoretical impact.
Look, the alternative to our counter-inter
is that any solar energy you have to topical. Like Trinity Solar and NSF.
That is worse for the topic.
That is worse for the topic.
Also, their extra T arguments are inevitable.
Their extra T arguments are inevitable.
Because any app,
there
is a conversion process.
Because of the conversion process, which they agree should be the frame.
Also, there's no reason why them getting more pick ground wouldn't be preferable.
Also, they can see that they get pick ground vector T, which will answer the 2 and R. Also, reasonability is good enough for only arguments judge intervention, but
if we have one card that says
it's process, it means we're reasonably topical.